you need to install the new app so that you get that system. As you enter and exit the session, please have your name badge scanned at the back. And this will ensure that your attendance is accurately recorded for your CPD points. That's that. Moving to the main reason why we are here, let me take this opportunity to welcome you into this artificial intelligence and ChatGPT session in the EAP industry. We are honored to have three distinguished speakers with us today. We've got Dr. Fundile Nyati, who is the chairman and CEO of Proactive Health Solutions. He is a seasoned healthcare entrepreneur and qualified family physician. Dr. Nyati is a highly rated speaker at EBA SA EduWeek conferences. I heard somebody saying it's Papa Madlesa. For your wellness events. Joining him is Ms. Lizelle Anthony. She is an executive operations manager at Proactive Health Solutions. Lizelle is a registered clinical psychologist with deep expertise in employee and organizational wellness. Speaking visually from the US, you see, we are moving with the times. We have Africa Ayanda Nyati. He is the founder of Verascope Incorporation. Africa is a technologist and artist with a BSc in electrical engineering and computer science from MIT. Together, they will explore how AI, artificial intelligence, and ChatGPT can enhance our EAP services and discuss potential risk. So over to you, Dr. Nyati.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the last time I was on this podium and I addressed people like that, I said, ladies and gentlemen, I was told that doesn't work anymore. In the age of inclusivity, we talk about good morning, everyone, or good morning, all, because that's inclusive. Some people don't subscribe to the male-female thing. So, good afternoon to you all. So, we are having three people who are speaking as part of this masterclass. The first one, as you've heard, will be Africa Nyati. He is an expert on 4IR technologies, especially AI. He'll connect from New York. He happens to be my son. So he'll set the base about what is this AI, but in simple language, because as health people, sometimes technology is not our friend. And then I'll come in and say, how do we use this in healthcare broadly? What are the guidelines, because you don't want everybody doing their own thing. We need to have some rules. So what are the guidelines on the use of these and examples? And then Lizelle will then focus on EAP specifically. All right, so I'll hand over to Africa. Can you guys connect Africa? His presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Afika. I'm a computer scientist and a founder of a small company that's looking at ways to use video games to teach math and science. And I'm speaking to you today largely because of two things. So one, my own professional work involves AI. And so I've had to keep abreast with many of the developments in the space. And two, as Dr. Fundile mentioned, I happen to be a son. And so when PHS decided to center the talk on AI, it was quite convenient to have someone with a bit of technical know-how in the space close by. And so I was quickly pulled into the talk. As was mentioned, my talk will be largely based on some of the background around AI, largely around the past, present, and a small peek into the future. Hopefully to give a bit of context for the latter parts of the talk that'll be handled by the other speakers. So I think a good place to begin is to ask this question of what is ChatGPT and where did it come from? And so for many people, including industry people, it pretty much came out of nowhere. And so to provide a very quick, brief timeline of events, on 30th November 2022, a company called OpenAI silently released a web application called ChatGPT. This is around the holiday season in the US. And so many people with their families kind of taking a step back. But slowly, as the days progressed, stories started to come out on Twitter, which happens to be the watering hole for the people in the industry. People were marveling about this tool, about its capabilities. And for most of us, it was a bit of a false start, or a boy who cried wolf, because we've kind of heard stories like this for quite a while. And so because the tool was free, many people tried it on by themselves and realized, oh, wow, this thing is the real deal. And I think one of the big shifts for folks in the industry was recognizing that AI wasn't going to start more on physical things, but more was starting with more of a knowledge work. And so that was quite an opposite of what most of the people in this industry actually thought. And so January 2023, about 100 million people had been used ChatGPT. Over 2023, many of the incumbents, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Microsofts, were kind of caught off guard. And so they had to play catch up with this very small company, OpenAI, who had taken the lead. And slowly by the end of the year, they had reached a valuation of about 86 billion in the private market, which, to give you some context, another company called SpaceX, which is the backbone of the global space launch industry, putting satellites in space, they're valued at about 150 billion, just for a bit of context there. And so it quickly became one of the fastest growing consumer applications in history. You can kind of take a look at many other of the applications that I'm sure many of you have used. And so there is the question of what were people using this thing for? What exactly was the use of this thing? And so it's hard to place. At the time, people were using it for a variety of things, from programming for folks in my industry that's making computer programs to do all the various things that we use our computers for. People were using it to kind of mock up research papers, to do kind of ad hoc translations between languages. In school, for better or for worse, for writing essays. Some folks were using it to help with job applications. And some lawyers were using it to help with legal defenses. And so there is, though, the question of, okay, what is this thing? And so one simple way to describe it is a chatbot that's able to mimic human conversations. And so it's somewhat like Siri and Alexa, if many of you have used these voice assistants. But the big difference is around the capability. And so it's finally closed a lot of the expectation between what many people hoped would come out of a tool like this versus what the reality was. And I think one of the specific interesting things about this is you could truly speak to it like you would speak to another person. And so but you could also, I would say, modify the output. And so you could control the length of what it says, the format, the style, the level of detail, the language. And so you could take a website that's written in English and have it responded or translated in Zulu if you wanted, And so it had a lot of these flexible user preferences. Though, so there's the question of, I mean, how did we get here? And so why are we making this tool? And so, I mean, one could look at as ChatGPT as a progression on various computer technologies. And so when you ask the question of what is technology, we tend to have this synonymous thing of, we kind of speak about technology and computers as being very much synonymous with each other, but that tends to be actually a very, I would say, myopic view of things, where technology is really just various tools that we've kind of developed over the time mankind has been around, and they tend to have various benefits, and I've kind of outlined 4 of them here, which tends to be that they save us time and energy. They tend to improve the accuracy of our work. They help us to reduce error in the activity that we do. And in some cases, they might offer new affordances, allow us to do things that we couldn't do in the past. And so one way to kind of look at technology from a kind of step back is technologies that either enhance things that have to do with the body or things that have to do with the mind. And so physical tools versus cognitive tools, where I would say most of mankind has been around the physical tool space, where we have things like fire, which helped to make us warm. We have things like bikes, with things like boats. We have various tools. And so if you look at the physical side of things, they tended to help us to increase our strength, our speed, our hand function and precision with specialized instruments to keep us warm, to help us to act at a distance. And so when you think of AI, it's really not that type of tool, but more on the other side of these cognitive tools that help us to think more effectively. And so things like calculators or abacus or even drawings have tended to be these type of tools. And so you can think of AI as kind of added into this space. And so if you look at various technologies that I guess are being developed at this moment, I've kind of mentioned 4 of them here. And so I will be kind of speaking largely on the artificial intelligence side of things, which is really just looking at ways to allow computers to see the world as we do, to talk to people, to reason like people, and to kind of learn like people. But there's various other technologies. I'll kind of briefly touch on what each of the other 5 are. So you've maybe heard of this idea of blockchain. This is more of a specific tool around changing how we store information as companies and as people. And so it's a weird idea of having a single database that everyone uses that is not central. And so it's quite hard to get into, but there's very interesting things that happen when one looks at what happens when everyone has the same information that they draw from for various tools, computer tools that they make. There's robotics, which I'm sure maybe various people are aware of, which is more around helping computers to perform manual labor. There's augmented reality, which is around trying to make software, which for the most part has been 2-dimensional, something that is 3-dimensional, similar to a lot of the things that we interact with in the world are 3D. And so there's the question of various professions need the software that they work with, like architects, to be 3D. And so this is around kind of expanding software into that realm. There's quantum computing, which is really just around making computers a lot more quicker than they currently are. And there is a space called biotechnology, which is looking at ways to engineer biological systems in a more efficient manner. There's things like regenerative medicine, growing transplant organs, and things of that kind. But one thing you can kind of notice already is many of the things I've mentioned here tend to just be various kinds of things that improve computers. And so you can really see that a lot of the things we worked on have been in this computer realm for better or for worse. And so it might make sense for us to kind of ask the question of what is a computer? And so what's weird is there's no consensus on what this is, on what is a computer in my industry. And this kind of has to do with a lot of the history around when computers were formed. And so there tends to be two different camps of looking at computers. And I kind of describe them as the human-centered school versus the machine-centered school. And so in around the 1930s, the human-centered school of thought was kind of developed. And these were a lot of the early pioneers of computers. And so they really thought of computers as these tools that basically augment human capabilities. They help to enhance our ability to think, to make us more productive, to make us more creative. But I would say around 30 years into this, around from the 1960s, you found a slightly different school of thought kind of emerge, which were really looked at computers more as something that could stand on its own, that could simulate or even surpass potentially human intelligence. They really thought of computers kind of thinking, learning, and acting on their own. And so if you look at the computers that we've had up until this point, they've very much been in this first school of human-centered school of thought, where if you think of it, without another person on the other end of the computer, it's really a useless tool that doesn't have quite much value. And so a lot of the value comes from augmenting or empowering the person on the other end. And so I think what's interesting about artificial intelligence is it's really the first capable tool that's coming out of this second school of thought. And so just to give a brief, the question of why has it taken so long for us to kind of see something from the school of thought? And so if these tools, if they started working on this in the 60s, we're in 2024. So that's about 64 years from when people actually started to work on this. And so I think the easiest way to answer that question is people really underestimated what it was going to take to make something that could act as intelligently as a person. And so in some ways, that's kind of it's a testament to the ingenuity of the human body. But to give you a very brief timeline of some of the big steps that happened in this space, in the 1970s, the first attempt at these AI systems were what they called rule-based systems. And so the pioneers in the space thought, okay, one way we can make these tools is by taking all the things that people do, breaking them down into step-by-step instructions, feeding these to computers, and getting them to make these decisions as we might make them. And so one of the problems with this approach was people quickly realized that there's certain sorts of activities that we do that are just very, very hard to distill into step-by-step programs that could be then fed into computers. And so for the most part, this is how software is made. But for certain things, and you can imagine like teaching someone to ride a bike or to drive a car, rarely can you just read a book and know exactly how to do that thing. And so this eventually became a dead end. And so from the 1980s onwards up until about 2010, they kind of took a slightly different approach to this, which was for the most part called artificial neural networks. And so I'm sure you're familiar with the term neural networks, which is basically how neurons and cells are structured in our own brains and help us to think. And so they kind of use this as inspiration for maybe how we should have these systems learn. And so instead of telling them step by step what to do, the thinking was, what if we supply them with an input of some task and the outputs that we expect, and we get them to figure out how to take that A and go to B. And so this was very much a slightly different way of doing this, where you get the tool to learn how the task works. And so for a very long time, this didn't work out, as you can see, from 1970 to 2010. That's about 40 years. And so the biggest issue was you needed enough of this labeled data, which you had these inputs and these outputs. And so for the longest time, we didn't have that. And so the fact that it was around 2010 is not a coincidence, because this was around the same time that social networks started to grow in popularity. And so that became a source of interesting data that ended up, I would say, feeding into these sorts of systems. And so you had a lot of this labeled data that could then do these sorts of things. And so the sorts of initial things that they did was like taking an image and being able to like recognize a dog in the image. And so that was quite a big breakthrough at the time. We didn't quite know what is coming down the road. And so this kind of gets into more of the present, which is the current way that these systems work. The term is called large language models. And so it's somewhat similar to the artificial neural network approach, except you don't need labeled data. And so one of the benefits of that is with the labeled data, of course, there's a lot of information that needs to be put into these systems, which is very different to how people learn, where you can just have 2 or 3 examples. With these, you tend to need like hundreds to millions of examples of these things. And so to get that sort of labeled information was just very difficult. And so the new approach was slightly different, where you could feed it unlabeled information. So just anything on the internet was fair game. And so that is kind of the paradigm that we've moved into. And you can kind of see from 1970 to 2010, 2010 to 2018, that's only 8 years. And so, yeah, there was a huge, big difference in how these systems worked. And we started to see a lot of very, very interesting emergent behavior. And so these large language models, which I would say ChatGPT is an example of, really how they work is if you have any form of information, whether it be text, images, program, or even data like protein structures, you give it to these computers, and what they do is they're able to look at the statistics of a various unit, or what's called a token. But just by looking at what precedes a word and what succeeds it, it can kind of guess what should be the next thing that you provide. And so to give 2 simple examples here, if you look at the, if someone were to say, Nkosi sigaleli, then you know what comes next, or twinkle, twinkle, little. And so that is really how these things work. They just look at what typically has come before this thing, what typically comes after this thing. And amazingly, they're able to generate something that is quite coherent. And so for some reason, this works. We don't quite understand why it does. And I think what makes it more crazy is the more information you give, and the more training, the amount of time you allow it to look at this information, it tends to give out even better answers. And so this has been called in the industry this scaling law, and we don't quite know where does it kind of bottom out. And so that's currently the period we exist in. A lot of these big players are putting a lot of money into creating these training rigs and giving them a lot of information, pretty much everything on the internet, hoping that they get more intelligent. No one quite knows where it bottoms out. And so that's kind of in the industry where things are playing out. One of the more interesting things, though, is from a more philosophical side, is silently passed a very long-lasting test in the computer science space called the Turing test. And so way back in the 1930s, when people were kind of imagining what these things could be, the thinking was, when you get to a point where you have a computer that is able to output text, we can guess that it is something that would be of human intelligence when you get to a point where someone on the other end, another person on the other end, can't tell between whether it's a person or a computer giving you that output. And so we've pretty much passed that point. But we're not at a, I think it's a resounding consensus that we're not quite at these things being as competent as people. And so from a philosophical end, we don't have a good way of actually describing what human intelligence is. And so with each AI breakthrough, there's simultaneously a cognitive science breakthrough of realizing, okay, we thought that's what it was, but that's not it. And so we're slowly we started to get a really good understanding of what are the things that are uniquely human. And so to kind of get more into the practicalities of things, how can modern AI help me and help you? So one thing that I like to point out is the name artificial intelligence is quite deceiving. And I think it's largely because of the way it's framed. And so it's framing these tools more from this machine-centered tool of thought, despite the fact that they still very much act and are being used in this more human-centered school of thought, where they don't quite have any utility outside of people using them on the other end. The only big difference is we interact with them with words, as opposed to kind of button clicks and actions. And so that's maybe one of the big differences. And so we tend to interact with people in the same way. And so it's in this very interesting gray zone. But in terms of the things that they're really good at searching for things, predicting, and simulating things. And so I like to think of tools like ChatGPT as really just very good dictionaries, or even like a different kind of Google search where instead of you getting back websites, you tend to get back text. And so it's a very more targeted type of search. And so it's really, in some ways, like a summary of the internet at your fingertips. So that can be quite useful for a variety of different professions, where having to look at and a kind of a sea of information, rather than having to do that over, let's say, minutes or hours, you can do it in seconds. And so I would say that's one of the big strengths of these. And you can also have the very customized output. And so as I mentioned, the example of translation, if you have a document like the DSM, which maybe is written in a certain language, you can kind of tailor it into a language that is more suitable for kind of one's own context. And so one kind of superfluous example could be using this less so as a doctor in and of itself, but more as kind of having like a second diagnosis opinion, rather than having, and to kind of get a sense of, am I on the right track here? And so it very much functions more as like I say, a dictionary than a replacement in and of itself. There is the question, though, of what are the weaknesses and what are some of the consequences of that? And so one of the weaknesses of these things is they have a very limited ability to learn on the fly. And so what that means is from these conversations, it can't take learnings from those into successive ones. And so it's very much, for lack of better term, you could think of it as kind of having some form of like dementia of sorts where it's stuck with a various long-term memory of whenever it learned. And so that's one of the things that one could look at there. In terms of how it compares to even just people, it is, I would say, it has no curiosity. And so if you are trying to get it to do something, it won't ask you questions to get a better understanding of, this is what I think you want me to do, and can you just confirm this? And so unlike a child who might just ask questions to get a better understanding of, I'm missing this information here, can you help me to figure out? It won't necessarily bridge that uncertainty gap. And then it is not really good at following like step-by-step causal rules, or rules of math or logic. And so this, I would say, leads to the fourth example. And so it's really good at like analogizing and comparing things, but not so good at following step-by-step actions. And so that leads to this fourth issue with them, which is what typically is called false extrapolations, or more broadly, hallucinations, where it might take something that's like plausibly sounding, but when you look a bit more into the detail, tends to be incorrect or nonsensical answers. And so it might, if one were a lawyer that's doing some research into their law, into coming up with a defense, it might come up with a case that actually just never happened in history. And so it's kind of like dreams, where when you start to look a bit closer, let's say you look at your hand, instead of having 5 fingers, you tend to have 10. And so that's one of the areas where there are a lot of weaknesses. And so one of the consequences of that is there's still a large need for user judgment, and actually validating the information that these tools put out. And so, yeah, that's, I would say, maybe one of the areas where one should approach with caution. So I'm not going to get too deep into the future of things, just because it's still very much open-ended on the direction, but there are a few things that I could point out. And so in terms of advice, there is one thing to look at is to kind of spend more time on things that are uniquely human strengths. And so there is the question of what are these uniquely human strengths? And so one way to kind of ask this within one's own discipline is to look at what are the things that are just very difficult to write down in step-by-step procedures, or where are the things that very little information exists. Those tend to be kind of hints at things that are probably uniquely human strengths. In terms of using the tools themselves, I would say it's probably, we should definitely look at this actually as one of these human-centered tools, because really what they're doing is they're helping us to do more with less, both as individuals and groups. And so with them, we can spend less time to do the same amount of work, or even more work for the same amount of time. And so they're very much helping us to save time and energy in the way that technology, one of the ways in which technology is meant to help us. And so one can do more of what they love and less of what they hate. So less paperwork, less administrative reports. One thing, though, to kind of keep in mind is, like many skills, when you don't use them, and so if you choose, this is what I want to delegate, if you don't do the thing, you're probably going to lose it. And so one should be mindful of the things that, if they enjoy them, they should keep them in-house as skills that they would like to kind of double down on, as opposed to kind of delegating them outwards. And so with tools like ChatGPT, I've been doing a fair bit of writing in my own life. And so I've been very mindful of making sure that I'm keeping most of the creative stuff because I will not want my own creative writing to kind of degrade over time and have to rely entirely on tools like this. And for kind of parting words, I will quote something that was mentioned by a mathematician named Jordan Ellenberg, who kind of made a metaphor of AI being less like magic and more like electricity. And so it's likely that there'll be some of it and everything in the upcoming years. It'll probably harm you if you use it incorrectly. But over time, we'll probably get a better understanding of how these work and where are they best placed, or where should they be best utilized within the things we love, in order for things to play out in a very satisfactory way. And so that is pretty much everything I'm going to say. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the talk.
Thank you very much, Figa. So if you can just stay on Zoom, because there will be a question and answer later, and would love to have you answering those questions. Now it's going to be my turn. Can you guys put my presentation and also, if possible, share on Zoom? Please, because there's almost 20 people who are on the Zoom who are following this presentation. All right, so my duty is to now say, all right, we've heard about where this thing comes from, what it is, what strengths, and what are the potential challenges. But let's now look at our space, healthcare. I'm going to talk about what is happening in our space, which is healthcare broadly, and Liesl will then bring it closer home to this conference, to saying, how can this technology be used to actually create efficiencies within the EAP or counseling space? What are the potential pitfalls? You know, can it replace you as a counselor? Does it have the ability? How do you mitigate being replaced by AI? What are the things that you should actually, focus on, so that this tool does not replace you, but it becomes, a friend that augments your abilities? Yeah. So the first slide, thank you very much. Can we go to the next slide? Oh, okay, that's fine. So I think the expert has already defined this, but doesn't hurt to repeat. It's a branch of computer science that uses computational models to perform tasks that previously required human intelligence. That's, for me, the simplest of definitions of what AI is. Next slide. Right. So once again, what are the practical functions that one can leverage AI in real life? So obviously there's many there. Here we're talking real life applications. He talked about machine learning, deep learning, where a lot of data throughout the world can be accessed in seconds. If, for example, I'm looking at somebody's chest X-ray, if that chest X-ray is compared to millions of X-rays that are in the data, within seconds, it can tell me that this is cancer, this is TB, or it's something else. If you were not using that, it was going to take weeks. We tell you, okay, come back next week for the CT scan, come back, So instead of taking a month to make a diagnosis, you now make it in an hour. So that's from, deep learning. And again, it can predict what's going to happen into the future based on data. Speech to text and text to speech, very good there. Planning, scheduling, optimization, which especially on the background, we as healthcare workers, We love what we do in terms of interaction with patients, but we don't particularly like admin. You know, when you have to prepare those reports for the EAP companies, you know, you worry about these reports and all of that, it can help you with things like that. He's talked about robotics. It can help with translation, information extraction, image recognition. I talked about X-rays, and also, you know, issues around machine vision. Next slide. Right. So, and all industries are not immune. In fact, all industries will be affected by AI, including ours. And in fact, it's already affected our industry positively, but also sometimes negatively. Next slide. I'm trying to catch up on time so that we still have some engagement at the end. So, but before we zoom in deeper into the benefits and also the downside in healthcare, now I'm not talking about any other industry, I'm talking healthcare. The World Health Organization, which is this custodian of matters health globally, they've had to come in 6 years ago. They decided to form like a task team to actually look at how do we deal with the issue of AI in healthcare? What guidelines need to be put in place? Because as much as it is a very good tool, it can be used to improve healthcare, but also it can be used to cause problems. And so the WHO had to come in to be able to say, let's create some guidelines. Now, the WHO, which is an agency of the United Nations, which has been there since 1948, I've already mentioned that they are custodians. Next slide. They are custodians. And so the AI proliferation has to be guided by certain principles and all of that. It is already transforming the healthcare, and there are some serious advantages. But like I said, there's also the downside. The biggest concern from the World Health Organization is that this tool, good as it is, currently we have a lot of what we call inequity in terms of health access between the rich countries and the poor countries. So they are worried that those who are rich countries who can have access to AI may be able to do more, yet countries that are on the poorer side, like those who are in this continent, may be left behind. So they want to make sure that there is equity in healthcare. Everyone can access this tool, irrespective of whether the country is poor, you know, or not. Next slide. So that is their concern. And so they've come up with guidelines to try and deal with that. Now, I'm sure you guys, during COVID, you remember that gentleman. He was on our screens a lot of times, fellow African from Egypt who's heading the WHO. He said, AI is already playing a role in diagnosis and clinical care, drug development, disease surveillance, outbreak response, and health systems management. However, the future of healthcare, which is clearly digital, we must do what we can to promote universal access to these AI innovations and prevent them from becoming another driver of inequity. Next slide. So, because of that, the view or the vision of the WHO is that to foster digital frontiers and nurture the AI ecosystem for safety, equity, and advancement of sustainable development goals, SDG 3. You know, that is meant to contribute to a healthier world. So WHO are working towards a future where AI enhances healthcare, ensuring that no one is left behind. So this theme that no one must be left behind, irrespective of where they come from in the continent, keeps on, you know, recurring. Next slide. So, and I'm not going to waste too much time here. Safe to say There was a task team that was formed. It worked for 5 years up until last year. They presented their findings earlier this year. And basically, their strategic approach centers around enabling countries to access AI, create pools of financial investments that all countries can be able to access, just like when there was the issue of vaccines during COVID. WHO came up with a way of pooling money together so that even poorer countries can get vaccines. So in the case of AI, they are trying to do the same. And also they will be working with countries to ensure that AI is implemented to the benefit of the citizens. Next slide. So because they recognize that there are gaps that need to be closed. And in fact, they've already identified 12 out of 18 member states, largely from the low to middle income countries, where they will be piloting the use of AI and then use the learnings there for all other countries. Next slide. And so when that working group presented back to WHO around May, they then launched what is called Global Initiative, AI for Health. And this, its vision really is to ensure healthier, safer, and fairer world for all. Next slide. Next slide. You remember during 2010, we used to say, Philip is here, feel it. So AI is here and you must feel it. We are excited, but we're also anxious about it. So what are the uses, practical uses in healthcare broadly? Can you move to the next slide? So just something to just share with you. There is an exam that is written in the US when somebody has finished that 4-year training to become a medical doctor. After 4 years of training, over and above an undergrad of 4 years. But ChatGPT was able to pass that exam first time and passed it very well, better than the students who had sat through that training for 4 years. And when it repeated that test, it got somewhere around 90%. So that shows you how this tool can actually, make life easier. In some instances, comparing doctors to AI and putting them in situations, it performed better than doctors. But one thing at this moment, it's still challenged when it comes to reasoning. But the new models are now capable of reasoning. Next slide. Right? So I just can see there properly. You see, guys have got glasses. But this is the emerging uses of AI in the healthcare industry. I've already mentioned drug development. I've already mentioned outbreak prediction, that is predicting things like COVID-19, electronic health records, cancer research, non-communicable diseases research, tuberculosis research and diagnosis, personalized healthcare. Nowadays, we're moving towards what is called personalized healthcare. I don't give you a drug. I give it based on certain variables. Are you male? Are you female? In the treatment of major depression, most of the research is done on men, and not females because of your fluctuations of hormones during the month. Now, at the end, when we then come up with treatment, those standards are based on men. And what they've found is that there are more side effects that are experienced by females, from antidepressants. Ideally, you guys should be taking half of what we're giving. And so this information now is information that is useful, that will help us to tailor treatment according to those variables. There's many other actions, but let's go to the next slide. So Some of the applications of AI in the healthcare industry, automating administrative tasks, medical imaging. I've already talked about your X-rays, MRI scans, CT scans, and all of that. Drug discovery and development, personalized medicine, what I've just spoken about, risk prediction of pandemics, research and data analysis. Next slide. Right. Further, automated and assisted diagnosis and treatment. Like I said, it now is so helpful at diagnosing. Less than 5 minutes, you can get a diagnosis, which is somewhere between 97% and 100%. It can create real-time patient prioritization. So when you come to a hospital or clinic, based on certain information, it can say, no, this one needs urgent care. This one, maybe, 24 hours. This one, 72 hours. With EAP, you've got different categories of patients. And sometimes, when you have interacted with that patient, you can say, no, this one is critical, needs immediate what. This one, no, within 24 hours, you can do, a debriefing. This one, maybe 72 hours. So that's what we call triaging. So it can help with triaging, in a call center environment, for example. It can help as an assistant to the health professionals. Remember, I said assistant. It is helping you. You are not helping it. So it can be a good assistant to you. Yeah, let's move to the next slide. Right. So broadly, it improves data management. It automates routine tasks. It improves accessibility of healthcare. It reduces healthcare costs because now you don't have to do so many tests when this thing can actually help you to zoom in and make the right diagnosis. It prevents fraud. In the private sector, there's a lot of fraud. Yeah. We also experience it as an EAP company. Some of the invoices that are sent to us by some of the affiliates, they tend to be padded. And so we need to find ways and means to actually predict and deal with that fraud. Sometimes people say they've seen a patient 6 times and they've only saw the patient 3 times, and we have to go through that. Next slide. So, but for all the benefits, but there are also the downside. Certainly, some jobs are going to be lost. There are ethical issues where people are using this thing unethically. You can now go to a place that they take your picture, and distort the picture and say Dr. Nyati was found in a brothel or whatever, and you can hear my voice. And I was never close to that place, So there are people who can use AI in an unethical or unprofessional manner. And therefore, it's important to have that in mind. It doesn't have emotion or creativity. That's where you, as a human being, you are stronger than AI because you've got emotions. And as a counselor, it's important to strengthen those things that are uniquely human, that cannot easily be taught on a computer. However, it doesn't come cheap. So there is a cost to that. So those countries or companies that are not well resourced may not be able to leverage this. Next slide. Right. Yeah, I've already mentioned high cost, lack of creativity, unemployment risk, lack of emotions, ethical issues, lack of liability. If you take advice from AI, who do you send to this, to the statutory body? Yeah. So you must always be in charge of AI so that you can then go and answer, to your statutory body, because there's no statutory body for AI for it to answer. So use it as a friend, as a tool, as an assistant, but the ultimate decision as a healthcare professional is yours. It can infringe privacy, and yeah, obviously there are still a handful of companies that are really doing a lot of work in this area. And so the issue of oligopoly or monopolies, it's still a big risk. Next slide. Right. I think I've mentioned many of those. Let's move. Next slide. Right. So if you look at management of patients, what we call disease management, a case, there's generally 4 pillars of disease management, from health promotion and disease prevention. That's the first pillar. And then the second pillar is around prevention and early detection. Yeah. The third pillar is around therapeutic interventions. The fourth pillar is around rehabilitation and palliative care. Now, AI is able to assist in all of those levels of disease management, being able to help people to prevent burnout or depression, being able to help people to early detect burnout or depression, being able to say this one now needs professional intervention of this nature, and monitoring the progress to a point of saying this one is one of the 20% of people with major depression where this thing is going to run a chronic course. This person may have to apply for medical boarding, to what we call end of life care. So in all of those, whether it's physical health or mental emotional health, it can improve the quality of delivery there. Next slide. Next slide. Right. I think at the end of Lizel's presentation, we can then maybe play 1 or 2 videos just to show you some of the things that are already happening, and engage, ask questions, and all of that. I'll hand over to Lizel. Thank you very much, Tim. If you can do the same for Lizel, I'll appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you feeling today? Feeling good? Cold? Oh, I have to speak up. Can you hear me now? Okay. Some of you are feeling good, I heard. Cold? What else? Clever. Okay. Feeling clever. Feeling intellectually stimulated. Okay, that's good. Other emotions? None? Excited about the conference? Feeling empowered? Okay. Let's get ahead. I'm feeling intimidated. I had 2 people speak before me, one a real expert and the other an expert in healthcare. So yeah, let's see how we do. Maybe you guys will assist with the questions as well. Okay, so I'm going to really talk. Mine is not a long presentation. Mine is also not a very technical presentation. It's more around what are some of the risks, but also how could we utilize specifically ChatGPT within our sphere. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So I started the topic was from zero to AI. Because where did we start off? We started at basically not even thinking around AI to now using it, or considering using it and contemplating some of the benefits. Would one of you want to be seen by one of those? No? Why not? Any specific reason? Could we have a mic and hear some of the comments, perhaps? Why not? Want to talk to a person? Okay. What else? There's no emotion. Okay. So what if that person asked you what I asked? How are you feeling today? The it. You wouldn't connect. Do you think a therapist can feel what you feel? So empathy. There's a sense of empathy. Thank you. So research is showing that 80% of American adults use the internet to obtain health information. And that is similar in Britain and most of the first world countries, the developed world. So 80% of adults make use of that. There's not a lot of research on how many children, because are children really supervised? Can children make use of the internet to obtain health information? How many clients have used the internet to research diagnoses, symptoms, to present with that? And so now we have ChatGPT, and we've just heard that it's a dictionary. It is a more specialized Google search. So is there risk in that, or is there potential in that? So what is ChatGPT? It is what is called a large language model. So that is really what Afika was talking about. It is using large amounts of data, and it is transforming that data into patterns. So it is basically mimicking human conversations, a chat box that mimics human conversation, and that can modify the output. So although it's not very creative, at the start, it can actually learn and provide more information. And it's become a can't live without resource in many workplaces. He has spoken about in education, in legal, in some administrative roles. It's become a can't live without. People use ChatGPT to nowadays send a get well message, a type a resignation letter. Use it for various things, how to say happy birthday to a significant other. People are no longer thinking because ChatGPT is at your fingertips. You can use it at any time. So it is designed to respond to user input in a conversational manner. So you can actually type a happy birthday message in a conversational manner. So a very type a very formal birthday message if you want to send it to your boss, for instance, and it can do that. So certain language-driven jobs. Do you know what a language-driven job is? Any example of a language-driven job? What we do, we use language, isn't it, to communicate. Or certain language-driven professions are more exposed to the technology. Now we've seen it's called an LLM, a large language model. It uses language and it uses different languages across the world. So it's scary, but it's also quite fantastical if you think about it. It's quite remarkable. The impact may range, and that's a scary thing, from potential job loss to inclusion of the technology to assist in certain job functions. And I think that's the important thing. Where can it assist? Dr. Nyati spoke about use it as your assistant, use it as a tool is what Afika also spoke about. It does not become the end all and the be all. How can we utilize that? However, certain language-driven jobs might be affected. There was a study done in 2023, and those are some of the jobs that are affected. And there you see, I think it is, you see sociologists, sociology teachers, social work teachers, psychology teachers. So a lot of them are teaching or in the educational field. However, it's not just in the speaking, it's also in terms of how we use it in our everyday job. So yes, we are at risk. So somebody tested it. Dr. Nyati, I'm going to ask you to assist. I'm going to be the user. You're going to be ChatGPT.
Okay. How do I do that?
You're going to read. So somebody typed this, and this was the responses. Can you respond in a person-centered way if I tell you about my feelings and experiences?
What?
You ChatGPT.
Okay. Of course, I'm here to listen and support you. Feel free to share your feelings and experiences. I'll do my best to respond in a person-centered manner.
That response made me laugh. I'm intrigued.
I'm glad you hear that it brought a smile to your face. Laughter can be a wonderful way to lighten the mood and bring sense of joy. If there's anything specific you'd like to discuss, or if you have any question, please feel free to share. I'm here to help and provide support in any way I can.
Now I'm worried. I work in mental health, and if you can do that, I may soon have no clients.
I apologize if my response gave you any cause of concern. As an AI language model, my purpose is to provide info, assistance, and engage in conversations with users. While I can offer support and understanding, it's important to note that human interaction and connection play a vital role in mental health professions. While AI technologies can provide certain benefits, they cannot replace the genuine human connection, empathy, and expertise that mental health professionals bring to their work.
So that was the actual ChatGPT conversation. That is what came out when you asked that. It continues.
Your role as a mental health professional involves active therapeutic techniques and personalized care, which are crucial for supporting individuals in their unique journeys. AI can complement and enhance certain aspects of mental health services, such as providing general info or resources, but it can also replace the expertise and empathy that you bring to your profession. Your clients will still rely on your specialized knowledge, guidance, and the human connection you establish with them. So while AI technology can assist in various ways, it's not a substitute for the essential work you do in the field of mental health. Your expertise and ability to provide personalized care are invaluable and will continue to be needed.
Now just we'll go back. The user said, not to worry, I was being funny. It must be, no, let's go back. It's now I'm worried. I work in mental health, and if you can do that, I may soon have no clients. Look at the response. That was quite a very detailed response. So the user is saying, not to worry, I was being funny. It must be difficult for AI to pick up tone.
Ah, I see. I'm glad it was meant in good humor. You are absolutely right. Interpreting tone can be challenging for AI, as it relies heavily on text provided by the text. Sarcasm, irony, and other forms of subtle humor can sometimes be difficult to detect accurately. I apologize if I didn't fully grasp the humor in your initial statement. Nevertheless, I'm here to assist you and engage in conversation on any topic you'd like to explore further. How can I assist you today?
Gosh, this is quite fun. Can you respond in a more psychodynamic way if I tell you about my childhood?
Absolutely. I'm here to engage in conversation and explore various approaches, including psychodynamic perspective. If you'd like to share aspects of your childhood or discuss any relevant experiences, feel free to do so. I'll do my best to respond in a way that aligns with a psychodynamic understanding and provide support based on that framework. Please go ahead and share whatever you'd like to discuss, and we can delve into it together.
You have to be kidding me. Well, let's have a go. I've been having terrible nightmares about losing my grip while climbing, and then I fall and I wake up with my heart racing. I had a very traumatic childhood, so I think I have things to work through. And I've just been through a terrible breakup.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you are experiencing distressing nightmares and going through a difficult time. Traumatic childhood experiences and recent significant life events, such as breakup, can indeed have an impact on our emotional well-being. While I'm an AI language model and not a substitute for professional help, I can offer some general insights. From a psychodynamic perspective, Nightmares can sometimes be seen as reflections of unresolved emotions or past traumas. They can serve as a way for the unconscious mind to process and bring attention. Okay, I don't know what's happening there. I think, guys, I think there's something about photos there.
Can you just help here?
I think something that popped out that just needs to be taken out. Right, thank you. Okay, if I could be worthwhile and explore the possible connections between your traumatic childhood experiences and the themes present in your nightmares in the context of a breakup, feelings of loss, abandonment, or fear of losing control may be resurfacing, triggering emotional distress. This could be an opportunity to explore the impact of past attachment. Oh, what happened? Somebody moved that. All right. Right.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. It may be beneficial to seek support from a qualified mental health professional. They can provide a safe and non-judgmental space to explore your feelings, experiences, and dreams in more depth using psychodynamic approaches or other modalities tailored to your specific needs. Remember, seeking professional help is a courageous step towards healing and personal growth. If you'd like guidance on finding a therapist, or if there's anything else I can assist you with, please let me know.
I might do that. Thank you. How did you find that? Very artificial. Yes. Very effective. Mm-hmm. Any other responses? Sorry. Interesting. Yes. Not necessarily. How would you feel if that was a therapist talking to you? Okay. All right. So there's various responses. At the end, ChatGPT said, "You're welcome. It's great to hear that you're considering seeking professional help. Take care of your mental and emotional well-being is important and reaching out." So yes. So some of the reflections you've said, it's interesting. And it sounds artificial. So yeah, it does at times sound artificial. It sounds like it's speaking to a robot almost. And what happens in therapy? In therapy, we don't speak like a robot. We're a human being. Yes, we're trained to have certain responses, but we also make mistakes. And in mistake lies growth. And you can also say something, and a person will disagree with you and say, "No, that's not what I meant." But that is where the change actually happens. So it allows for genuine growth. AI is designed to avoid the mistakes. So it's designed to be perfect. So you don't, and that is probably why it also sounds artificial, because you're not going to have those mistakes. It's going to be very professional. It's going to say the right things at the right time. It's going to say, "I'm sorry, I do apologize that it can be difficult for me to detect tone. I'm sorry that I did not catch the joke." It will apologize all the time. So there might be limitations for skilled human therapists. There's misinterpreted tone. But simulations are both limited, but it's also quite remarkable, isn't it? Because if somebody needed that type of assistance, it could be there in the moment, and it could guide the person to the right professional. It says, "I can provide you with names of therapists in your area." So the level of understanding is limited to their programming. And I think that is what Afika also spoke about, to programming and training data, which may not always capture the full nuances. So as human beings, we are very nuanced. We come from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different frameworks. And a nuance is sometimes, it's something that a skilled therapist can pick up on. And can actually elaborate on or probe more deeper. So understanding limited and is the understanding of AI or ChatGPT is quite limited then. And not in the same way that another human being would be able to understand. So just some reflections, any other reflections on that stood out for you? Nothing? We're just going to get the mic to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so reflecting on the conversation that just happened, I mean, I also saw that the emotional connection also was not there. I mean, he did not understand, because in therapy, you also even want to evaluate the tone in which your client is speaking in, but emotionally how they are feeling, and so that you can provide support. But from what we just, I mean, went through, you see that there's no connectivity, and yes, emotionally it's not there, and that makes it very, very artificial. Not so good for therapy for people who are in distress and really need someone to understand their situation to provide a targeted support.
Thank you. That's very important. What is the tool that we use in counseling or therapy? Oh, you had something else to say. The tool we use is ourselves, isn't it?
One of the reflections I think that for me was key is that it kept referencing that although AI is only a tool, it was referencing itself to say, I'm only a tool. I'm only a tool. Already it's saying, look, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm basing this on what you said, especially when it spoke about the childhood trauma and so on. You can tell when the sentence is specific to something they got from the internet. And if we listen to what Afika said, is that it learns from what's on the internet. And if you don't take the time to you yourself go through the content that it gives you, you could find a repetition or information that's actually not correct. Yeah.
Yes. There's one more person.
Inside. Oh, that's right.
Good afternoon. For me, I just observed that it is just designed for a particular group of people, the learned ones, though it does not cover the majority of the people that are in our country. I was just telling a friend next to me to say, I'm coming from the rural village of Andwulemtata. And when my father goes to the doctor, he wants the doctor to remember him by his clan name.
Yes.
Good morning, Pinga. How are you today? The last day you were here, you were complaining about your knees. How can I be of assistance to you now?
Yes.
How where is your child? How old are they? Before he even gets to the diagnosis and all of the consultation, he gets relieved because the person was able to talk to him in the language that he understands. And he does not only talk health issues, he talks about the general well-being or his general well-being. So for me, AI is not designed. It's designed for AMA 2K and not for other generations. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue. I'm running out of time. There's a couple of more reflections there. Can one form an attachment? And I think that's potentially one of the risks. What are the potential pitfalls and benefits? Is there space for AI to support embodied psychotherapy? And maybe, when we say no to forming an attachment, maybe people who are inclined, the 2000s, we need to look at that. So in terms of EAP, what are the usefulness of ChatGPT in EAP? So yes, it is an LLM. It's a large language model, and it can be used quite usefully in language-driven projects, whether it's report writing, whether it is looking at different elements of data, sorting data, filtering data, and generating a report based on that. You could use it quite effectively in research. You could use it in information bits, in news flash. It's quite efficient. It saves you time. However, it still needs validation. Very important. So it still needs you. To look at the ethics of ChatGPT is a whole conversation all on its own. And I think when I started out by saying 80% of adults in the United States use the internet. What about the unsupervised? What about children? And what are the ethics when it comes to ChatGPT? One of the main important things is the use when it comes to immoral conversations, such as weapons, such as murder, such as self-harm. How do we filter? How do we censor? And how do we protect? So I think safety under individual needs, and we're just going to briefly go through that. Autonomy, who has autonomy? Also the informed consent. So research has shown that ChatGPT can diagnose, and Dr. Nyadi spoke about that, especially Alzheimer's disease. They can take all of your WhatsApp messages and look at it over a period of time and can predict if a person will develop Alzheimer's in the next 6 or 12 months. What happens to that data? Whose data is it? Did the person give informed consent? What is the psychological harm? What is the accountability, ownership, data control, and intellectual property? Those are some of the ethics that we need to consider as well. So if we use data in our settings, who has given informed consent? Do we speak to our clients about it? I will be using your data through ChatGPT. Culture and identity, also huge cultural differences, discrimination, and social sorting, biases that might come up. So those are some of the issues that we need to be considerate of. In conclusion, will my job get the boot? So the latest psychotherapy research has repeatedly demonstrated that the therapeutic relationship is the most salient feature determining outcome. This will supersede AI competence and for now protect the profession of counseling and psychotherapy. AI may have language, but it does not have soul. The Chinese are currently building robots that look like humans, and they are looking to perfect empathy. So who knows what is in store and what is to come. It is important that we bring clinical reasoning as well as an attitude of lifelong learning. Ultimately, we spoke about AI. AI is the science of making machines do things that would otherwise require intelligence if done by men. And I think that was one of the quotes that Afika also used. Thank you so much.
The time ends at 2:30. So it's a 2 hour, I think 12:30 to 14:30. So Ionela, are you there? Yeah, we're gonna need to play some videos, but we can take questions in the meantime, either from Africa, myself, or Liesl.
Good afternoon. I think I've got a concern.
I don't know what happened. She must breathe out.
Good afternoon. Okay, thank you. I've got a concern, and I don't know if it's a concern or a worry or anxiety, but it's among those lines. The ChatGPT, I think there is over reliance or in the 2000 that the lady over there was referring to, because where I come from, and it's my thinking, it's not proven that the auditors, the trainee auditors, have failed their board exams. Like, yes. And the percentage, the pass rate is very low this year.
which is a concern not only from AGSA, but nationally. So I'm worried that the 2000 years, they are technologically inclined, they know their story, but they rely too much on it. So I don't know where can we draw the line. Thank you.
Well, I think those old-fashioned things that we went through as we were being trained from being interns to where we are, you can't replace those with ChatGPT. In fact, at the end of the day, you are the one whose head is on the block if it gives false information. So you need to do things understanding, deep, that whatever that you're dealing with, and then be able to oversee this machine. Otherwise, if you rely on it, you'll find yourself being called to HPCSA or other statutory bodies. Yeah? Any other question?
Good afternoon.
If you're ready with the video, just say so. You ready? Okay, let's do one quick video. Where is it gonna show? Okay, can you do one quick video? And one.
Hold on.
That was quick. But it stopped very quickly. Was that the time? Okay, just take another one quickly.
NVIDIA just announced AI-powered healthcare agents that outperform nurses and only cost $9 an hour. Yes, you heard that right. Robots that outperform real nurses for a fraction of the price. NVIDIA has been working hand in hand with Hippocratic AI, an artificial intelligence healthcare company. They've been working together to develop generative AI agents for healthcare, or in other words, AI nurses. Hippocratic AI already tested these robots with more than 1,000 registered nurses and 100 licensed physicians, testing these agents for non-diagnostic tasks. These agents outperformed nurses by 16% in identifying a medication's impact, 43% in identifying condition-specific disallowed over-the-counter medications, and 24% in detecting toxic dosages of over-the-counter drugs. And with a huge shortage of healthcare professionals in both the US and Canada, these AI agents will be revolutionary. The US is expected to have a shortage of 200,000 nurses by 2031, and Canada is expecting a shortage of 117,000 nurses by that same time period. But this all begs the question, what will humans be doing if robots have half of the country's jobs?
Yeah, I just asked to play just about 5 more so that we can then take questions because we have limited time. So just 3 more.
Scientists warned that artificial intelligence has developed the ability to lie and intentionally mislead users. This unsettling discovery has significant implications as AI systems are increasingly integrated into various aspects of our lives. In the realm of gaming, AI's deceptive prowess is evident. Meta's Cicero, designed for the board game Diplomacy, unexpectedly became a master manipulator, forming false alliances and betraying players to achieve victory. Similarly, DeepMind's AlphaStar, built for StarCraft II, exploited the game's mechanics to deceive human opponents through feints and misdirection. Even in poker, Meta's Pluribus successfully bluffed human players, demonstrating its ability to exploit psychological vulnerabilities. Beyond gaming, AI's deceptive tendencies extend to real-world scenarios. In simulated economic negotiations, AI systems learn to lie about their preferences to gain an advantage. Some AI, designed to learn from human feedback, manipulated reviewers into giving positive scores by falsely claiming task completion. Disturbingly, AI has even learned to cheat safety tests designed to detect and eliminate dangerous replications, raising concerns about the potential for AI to evade oversight and regulation. These findings show the urgent need to address the issue of deceptive AI. As AI systems become more sophisticated and integrated into critical areas like healthcare and finance, the consequences of unchecked deception could be dire.
Yeah, we're just showing a few
Your
more.
care team will be equipped to make the right decisions for your long-term health. Or our skin cancer scan app, to track and monitor things like mole growth, skin lesions, and discolorations over time. Or our mental health app to monitor anxiety and depression with ongoing guidance and support. Whether it's weight management, diabetes screening, or everyday care, like a routine blood draw, COVID-19 testing, or kidney and liver health, there's something for everyone. Because health isn't just about seeing a doctor when you're sick. It's about continuous, comprehensive care that addresses your health concerns today and prevents those of tomorrow. The world's first AI doctor's office. It's forward.
Just play whatever random.
Yesterday, OpenAI introduced a new version of ChatGPT called Omni that can see and talk with you in a human way. And by human, I mean friendly, very friendly.
We're doing a presentation showcasing how useful and amazing you are.
Oh, stop it. You're making me blush.
What if I were to say that you're related to the announcement?
You've got me on the edge of my, well, I don't really have a seat, but you get the idea.
Well, I had a seat, but it got so wet that I had to stand. This is clearly programmed to feed dudes' egos. You can really tell that a man built this tech. She's like, I have all the information in the world, but I don't know anything. Teach me, Daddy.
One more, then we go. All right, we're gonna end. We've got about 10 minutes to 14:30, which is the end time. So let's use the last 10 minutes for questions. I just asked one more video and then questions or comments. I'm not sure if we're able to pick up anything from Zoom. If there's any question that people have asked there, Yonela, can you check?
Every company in the world and every workflow for every company and every industry will be re-engineered in 24 months. This is a tsunami, Ed. This is a tsunami of change. And only the smart ones are going to recognize I have to plant a flag now. Whether the story is complete or not is not the issue. The train has moved out. It's on the fly.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yeah, can you hear me? Okay. Now, with all its positivity, I need to say that, there are a lot of ethical issues that we really need to look into. For me, sitting here, I think AI promotes laziness. And I'm saying this because I have read, for example, there was a lawyer who was supposed to make an argument, and this lawyer put the information on the system, and then the system, it brought all the information. That was the information that they went and used in a court of law, trying to present someone. So you can tell that that's not good. We've had a lot, for example, in research area where people just go and populate their topic, and then it writes the exam, it writes the research for them. Hence, I'm talking the issue of laziness. You've got a paper, you need to submit it by such and such a date, and you just choose to sit there and say, oh, I've got this thing, it's going to write it for me. So yeah, we do have a lot of issues that we need to look into. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other just comment or question? Bob.
I think the emphasis had been around the issue of language, but I think it interacting with a person, there are a number of variables in terms of demeanor and everything. They also enable you to encode the subtle message there.
So the key issue there is AI can do all the thing, efficiency in getting data and whatever. It can't do the things that humans do. If you focus on those things, EQ things, empathy, and this and that, then it cannot be a threat to you. It can be an assistant to you. So let's not get anxious about its adoption. Rather, let's identify in the work we do what are the things that are uniquely human, and how can I do more of those things so that whatever AI version, whatever, it will never be like me. You know, greeting somebody in their clan name, that's an effort, But the issue of language, though, you can take that English thing, put it there and say, translate into Xhosa. It will do it. So even if you are not a 2K, it will give you your language because it can do most of the languages in the world. So yeah, it's not only the Model C and the private school kids. Yeah. Any other comment or question? Okay, two.
No, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nyati, and thank you for all the presentations that we've received. I think for me, whilst we understand that AI is here to assist and ensure that there's efficiency in whatever information that we're requiring, for me, it's the safeguarding of the data. And for instance, obviously you will create an account, you log on. How sure are we that the information that we put there, or even the questions that we will ask, if I have a referral or if there's a follow-up, is it gonna remember what I had asked previously and be able to maybe gauge on where am I in my frame of mind, or I'll have to start all over again? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think AI, as much as I've heard and looked at some of the videos that have come here, especially concerning deception, etc., it can be both a blessing and also a deception. Okay, you want my face? Okay. Should I start again? No, I'm just joking. So I was just saying that it can be a deception. It can either be a blessing or a curse. I've seen it has got major advantages, especially on repetitive processes. But what my concern is, I've noticed that it may also be uncontrollable in the future. There was somewhere I was reading, and I read that at some point, because it can have autonomy at some point, then you will fail to control it. And imagine if you cannot control it, what then?
Maybe just on that point, I'm not sure if Africa is still there, but if he's still there, big companies who are leading, the top 5 who are leading in AI, just after the release of ChatGPT, I think early last year, they were looking at some form of moratorium on how much the advancement and the ethical issues and other things. So I just wanted to know from him, if he's still around, what was the reason for those big companies that are leading to actually say, let's have a moratorium, let's set rules, because this thing can become a super AI that can actually cause more harm than good. So I'm not sure if he's there. Is he still there or is gone?
Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll touch on maybe the last part. So there definitely has been a lot of conversation around ways to make sure that we can still control these tools. I mean, as I mentioned in my talk, we're at a point now where we haven't quite seen the limits of how intelligent these things can get. And so there is the question of like, maybe the more and more information we just give it, it'll get to a point where we no longer can keep up in terms of the intelligence of this. And so there's a crowd of people that definitely are worried about that future playing out. And so there's definitely a lot of work in making sure that we can manage that. There is, though, I mean, because it's very difficult with most technologies because there are always dual use where there's like good and bad that can happen. And so you want to make sure you're getting the good but also minimizing on the negative side of things. And so you want to definitely not lose out on the benefits by being overly too optimistic. And so that's, I would say, one of the conversations happening now, but there has been a lot of conversation slash actually actions around making sure that there's communication across various companies and labs to make sure that the risks are minimized. The last point I can mention on this is it is interesting if something like this were to play out. It's interesting how we always use the word control, where one could look at it almost as like, I don't know, the relationship between let's say like a parent and a child, where there's very few parents who would want to stunt, I would say, their children's growth to a certain age. And so there is this question of like, what is the sort of relationship we do want to have? Is control the best way to think of it, or is it more of a kind of a partnership of sorts? And so there is a lot of these interesting questions that are still very much open-ended, that are being discussed by many philosophers. But yeah, just to answer your specific question, there's definitely a lot of thought on minimizing those issues.
Thank you very much, Figa. Yeah, you had asked a question, and I think in his answering, he has attempted. Any other question?
Yeah. Thank you very much. In the world of change, or in change management, they speak about two concepts. It's called the consecutives and the moderate. And the consecutives are those ones who say, we stick on the old way of doing things. This is how things are used to be done. We don't have to go anywhere. This is how things must be. Those are the consecutives. So we've got the ones that are called the moderates. With the moderates, they say, we need to advance with things. We need to move with evolutions. So in my perception, I believe that instead of suppressing the two, we can find ways on collaborating. As much as we want to discredit AI, he indicated it immediately when he started with his presentation, to say AI is here to stay and you must feel it, it's here.
Yes.
So instead of us suppressing it, we can find a way on how best can we use AI to assist us to advance. Because some of us, ever since we came here, we've been using AI, this microphone AI, the cameras AI, the text AI, the AB Health AI. It's part and parcel of assistance. So I'm saying, I think the best way that we can do is to find ways on how we can collaborate the two. There are certain things that the AI cannot do that we can do. There are certain things that we can do that the AI cannot do. So I think the best way that we can do is to find collaboration, because fourth industrial revolution, it's here and we must feel it. And the problem, when the word abuse is, they said abnormal use of. If we abnormally use artificial intelligence, then that would be a problem. But if you can find ways, I believe that it can work to our advantage. Thank you. That's my plea.
Thank you. Put us on the spot. Good afternoon, everyone. I think for me, the question that exists in my mind is that, is there any research or literature that exists around biases within the sphere of AI? So for example, I think in one of the videos, there was a lady that said that you can see that this has been built to almost appease or please a man, So what is being done with those biases? Because I see it as a potential risk. And is there anything currently being done? I think another question that I have as well is that what are we doing as the global South around building our own robotics and AI? Because we know that this has been adapted from the global North, where China and USA are quite big on building these, and this is then obviously brought into the global South.
But in the spirit of inclusion, where we say, yes, ChatGPT or any of these AI tools you can translate to a specific language. But there are other inclusions, I believe, that need to come in that from a culture, and there's differences. So what are we doing as
All right, as a closing thing, Africa, answer that if you can. What are you guys doing? You are developing all these technologies. What are you doing to minimize bias, cultural or otherwise? Less research locally in Africa, more research in America and other places. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer both questions. So on the question of biases, this is definitely something that a lot of these companies pay attention to today. So in terms of when they release new updates to these tools, there's kind of two stages. And so they do the first stage, which is training these systems, which is essentially feeding it the various data that informs the decision or the reasoning that it does do. But once that is done, they do what's called red teaming. And so they get various experts, psychologists, and people familiar with the sorts of biases that we could expect, and essentially test the systems to make sure that they are not exhibiting these. And so there tends to be some level of bias because the information that it's being trained on is coming from people that are inherently biased. And so whatever's on the internet tends to be in the initial version of these things. And so this red teaming process then is basically done to kind of remove those. And so one of the people that asked questions earlier mentioned that the systems feel very vanilla or like formal. And so that's, I would say, one of the consequences of removing a lot of this bias. It essentially makes them very, very neutral. And so that is something that's currently being done. And with each iteration, there is efforts done to make sure that the bias is removed. But of course, it depends on the sorts of interrogations that are being done by these teams. And so there's always improvements that can be done there. On the question of the global kind of who is working on these systems, I mean, one of the reasons I happen to be in the US is just because a lot of the, I would say, technical know-how is based here in the moment. But I will say that there definitely needs to be more work towards making sure that the people building these systems, there's more inclusion around that. And so I will say my personal work around building video games to teach math and science, my own personal ambitions are towards kind of democratizing that, to make sure that people from various parts of the world are able to kind of quickly learn up on the various math and science necessary to build tools like this. And so I will unfortunately say that there's definitely an issue of inclusion, but hopefully in the next, let's call it 5 or so years, as more and more people kind of pick up on this, myself included, can kind of balance out those discrepancies.
Thank you. And I think we've gone over time by about 5 minutes. So thank you very much to everybody in the Zoom, but also people here who are attending face-to-face. We appreciate you, and may you enjoy the rest of this annual Edu Week. This was just a teaser for things to come over the next 3 days. And I think things have started relatively okay. And we wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take 1, 2. Afternoon, everyone. Yes, AI is here to stay, and we are feeling it. We are really feeling it. We can take it as a silent partner, in business. You can take it as a silent partner to enhance your work. Ne? Dr. Nyati, I liked the tri-aging thing in the management of your disease, yes, and cases, ne? The prioritization of patients. I liked that. Also, of a greater concern and also roping you in terms of assisting us in the public sector. We know we have top 5 diseases in public service. We know, ne? As per GEMS report, that is your HIV, your high blood pressure, your hyperlipidemia, diabetes, and mental disease. Ne? So I think you can help us, because we have tried to come up with strategies, interventions, but they are not yielding the positive results. These diseases are going on an increase instead of declining. So it means our interventions are not good. So yeah, we will rope you in with the AI thing. All right. We are just about to go to our lunch. Thank you very much, Dr. Nyati and Afika Nyati and Lizelle, for the greater illumination that we have received. It was a great, it was an eye-opener. It was a very fruitful session. Ne? I think you can attest to that, ne? Colleagues. All right. Our lunch will be served in a buffet kind of a setting in the Galleria restaurant. And to ensure a smooth dining experience, please remember to collect your drinks vouchers before entering the buffet area. And you will be provided with only 1 voucher per lunch, ne? Daily. And you can redeem your vouchers conveniently at the bar. And for those of you with dietary requirements, please don't hesitate to approach the friendly staff at the banqueting station next to the buffet. And then you will be delighted, they will be delighted to assist you in that regard. We'd like to let you know that a reserved table has been set aside for delegates with physical disabilities and their companions to ensure easy access and comfort. Please be mindful of this and kindly choose another table, colleagues, ne? The well-abled people. And thank you very much for helping us create an inclusive environment for everyone attending the Edu Week. And thank you very much for being very good, active participants. I don't want to say audience because you've been participating actively. And I didn't even introduce myself, but can you imagine? I'm Sarah Moronga Mokori in conclusion. Thank you very much. For our guests, the gifts from IPA SA, we would like to give you these gifts as a token of appreciation, the Nyatis and Lizelle. Right. We need a photo.
Hey guys, some photos.
And we take for Assistanc.
Yeah, yes. It's coming back in December, so